Just like Ham and Pineapple or Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg, at first glance, schools and researchers may seem like a strange pairing. Teachers are overstretched, young people are struggling, and research teams are trying to get results at a time of rising uncertainty and falling budgets. Historically, this has led to distrust and resistance on both sides. However, a shared understanding of these struggles, as well as a common goal of improving outcomes for young people, can actually allow partnerships like this to flourish. And, just like Martha and Snoop, it's the differences that can bring a little something extra to each other's work. So, whether you're a researcher, teacher, or even a young person wondering why you should care about research, we're here to break it down for you. My name's Catherine, and I'm on the comms team at the McPin Foundation. We exist to transform mental health research by putting the lived experience of people affected by mental health problems at the heart of it. In this podcast, we're talking about how schools and researchers can work together to get some incredible and mutually beneficial results. We'll be using a project called REACH, which stands for Resilience, Ethnicity, Adolescence and Mental Health, as a case study. It's based at King's College London and is a cohort study, which means that a group of people with a characteristic in common were tracked over time. It involves over 4,000 young people from 12 secondary schools across the London boroughs of Lambeth and Southwark. And the project aims to understand how young people develop mental health problems and what prevents these problems developing. To collect their data, REACH staff went into the schools periodically over 5 years to conduct a questionnaire on how the students were feeling and what life experiences they'd had. They also carried out in-depth one-to-one interviews with a percentage of the students. This was repeated each year to gain an insight into how their mental well-being changed over time. The team wanted to ensure the people affected by the study, students and teachers, had a say in how it was run, so included both on a steering committee and also did additional work engaging the students, involving them on advisory panels called YPAGs, which stand for Young Person Advisory Groups, and creating community champion roles. More recently, they've also included questions on how COVID has impacted young people's mental health. During the podcast, we'll hear from some of the researchers, school staff, and students who took part in the project. I'm here with Taishay, who's our co-host for the podcast. She's a student researcher, although you weren't actually at a REACH school, were you?
No, in fact, I wasn't. My mum worked at a reach school and I was in year 10 at the time and it was work experience time and everyone gets really stressed about that. Like, what am I going to do for work experience? And I was very stressed because I wanted it to be a good work experience that could lead me onto the path I want to do after school, after sixth form. And my mum spoke to one of the people we're going to speak to today, Gemma, and was like, my daughter really needs a work experience. She loves psychology. Like, can she be put forward? She was like, of course, of course. So they filled it out and go into it. I knew nothing about reach. I just knew something with psychology and I'm going to love it.
Well, it worked out well by the sounds of it. And then you've also been involved in the Young Person's Advisory Group, the YPAG, and then gone on to be a young person community champion.
Yeah, so a year after my work experience in March times during COVID, I became a YPAD member and I was helping them out with the new study about COVID and impact of COVID on young people and to help them out. Then they changed the role. So people from the YPAD became champions. And yeah, I love every minute of it and I've done a lot. It's amazing, to be honest.
So we're going to have more of a chat later on in the podcast, but I think that leads us really nicely on to introducing our first guest. This is Craig. He was the one who actually came up with the idea for REACH after doing similar work with adults to identify things that increase someone's risk or resilience to mental health problems. REACH starts out as quite a traditional research project, but in the clip we're about to listen to, he talks about what they actually ended up with and how they got there.
When we initially started out on this, we hadn't really, and I say I hadn't really thought about engagement and working closely with the young people on this. And in fact, that first really began to develop through conversations with McPin. and then subsequently in the schools themselves, it became clear that in order to be able to work with the schools, they needed to feel like they were getting something back. And so our engagement work really kind of developed from that, and has mushroomed and grown into something really, I think, quite remarkable. And it has become something that I think we're probably most proud of about the project, the extent to which we have engaged with young people, that young people have engaged with us, with the work that we're doing and so on. And then the impact because of that on young people, their understanding, their awareness of mental health and so on. So it's that engagement program which has, I think, been unexpected and great, but also has then enhanced the quality of the science, because it's through that engagement that we've ensured that we've got large numbers of people, that they're representative of the population that we're interested in researching, but also it provides a direct line through to impact as well, so that what we find can be directly channeled and funneled into schools and inform what they then do and what young people do to, as I said, to kind of try to mitigate and withstand some of these challenges that young people face.
So this idea of engagement and you know, the role that it came to play in the study, did you find that was different, or that it kind of, you know, played a different role than it would in your previous work with adults, maybe?
Yeah, completely. I guess it partly reflects the way that things have changed over the past 2 decades, really, in research, and the realization, appreciation that it is absolutely critical to involve people who are the ultimate end users of research in the process of setting the questions, generating the information, and then interpreting and disseminating. And that's not something that was typically done, say, 10, 15 years ago, at least not in the work that we did. Maybe just to add, I think the bottom line is that high quality science depends on engagement and co-production, and it's absolutely integral and central to it. And that's been our experience, very much our experience. And I think now funders appreciate this and in fact insist on it. And so the most recent funding that we got to do the COVID related work, the one element that the panel who assessed that application commented on was the engagement part of it. And that was the thing that they most liked. And I think that's because they appreciate that to produce findings that are meaningful and that have potential relevance to, as we all want to do, kind of change things to enable and to promote better mental health, that is now seen as being integral. So I think it basically is a mistake for anyone to develop a project which doesn't have that, and which doesn't have this as a core element of their funding application.
Craig talked about the importance of engagement in research, but what does that actually look like? Next up, we're going to hear about how to do this from Gemma, the project coordinator of Reach, who's here to talk about why she approached the project the way she did.
I guess a few reasons. I guess first and foremost, it feels like the right thing to do. It seems that a lot of research that I've been involved in as well in the past, and others, it's often a really extractive relationship. If we talk specifically, say, about school-based research, it's often the case that you have research teams trying to go into schools to collect data, and often asking a lot of very busy people in schools, and then kind of disappear, and maybe the kids get a certificate for taking part, and maybe the school gets to say they've worked with the world-class university, that kind of thing. And there's I don't know if it's still quite so prominent now, but certainly 5 to 10 years ago, it seemed to be that many research teams would feel that was sufficient in terms of what you give back to a school for taking part in the project, and what you give back to young people, which isn't the case. And of course, when you're doing school-based research, I think it's critically important to give back as much as you can, because you're asking a lot of staff who are already overworked. So I guess they're kind of broadly what's been going on through the first 5 years. And then more recently, what we've tried to do is, I guess, try to shift to a bit more of like a co-production style as opposed to a kind of engagement model, where we've now got young people working part-time in paid roles in our team. And then there's a group of 14 young people who work with us in various capacities, formerly in the team, and they're absolutely brilliant. It's incredible what they bring to the team. It really is invaluable.
It sounds like the schools ended up getting a lot out of it, and obviously it was incredibly successful in terms of what your team wanted to do as well. When you were first approaching them, was it quite hard to get their buy-in, considering that it does sound like it was, I don't know, potentially some reluctance? How did you kind of pitch it to them to get that buy-in?
We kind of just organised meetings, went in and spoke to the senior leadership teams and other staff who might be involved, and tried to kind of, I guess the key thing was from the outset, making clear that we wanted to do this in partnership with schools and move away from that kind of extractive model of working with schools. And that started with, I guess, offering before taking, I guess it maybe is the way to put it. We do ask a lot of the schools, and actually it's not just a case of organising for us to go in and do questionnaires with 500 kids a year. It's, timetabling rooms for us to interview the however many tens of kids are taking part in the interviews, and then getting them out of class or out of at lunchtime and so on to do virtual reality activities with us. And ultimately, at times our team were kind of almost embedded as staff in the school for long periods of time. So asking a hell of a lot. And so it was really, really important that we kind of set a blank slate from the outset and said, what can we do for you that would make it worthwhile you taking part and staying involved? And that's how the engagement program kind of was shaped up and came about.
Sounds really fun. Things like getting to do your lunchtime, virtual reality on your lunchtimes and stuff. I was like, oh, I wish I had something like that when I was at school. And it was initially a 5-year project. And how important is it to have that amount of time? Because obviously, that was factored into your aims and the kind of process. But do you think that for maybe other schools, other research teams looking at doing something similar or wanting to get involved, is it that level of time commitment will be needed?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I think the short answer is yes, it was very useful to have 5 years to deliver this. It meant that we had time to invest in the engagement side of things. That all of that side of it wasn't funded in the original grant. We kind of developed it because we saw that there was a dual benefit to doing it. It was the right thing to do, but it also improved the quality of the research. And so, although at periods it becomes very time intensive, and you wonder whether you've taken on too much and you don't have the staff to do it, ultimately it pays back, because you then have to do less of the groundwork to keep schools and people involved each year, because you've already got those strong relationships. So I think totally worth it. And I think for me, possibly the main benefit of having 5 years to do this than say 3 or 4, which you might expect from a typical grant, is that we were then able to be completely flexible for the schools.
It was really great to hear about how the research team approached the project. But what about the other side of the fence? Caroline is a teacher at one of the girls' schools that was taking part in Reach. She's been there an impressive 17 years, and she's the PSHE, or Personal, Social and Health Education Lead. She was brought in as the main point of contact for the school after the deputy head found out about the project. Here she is talking about why they wanted to get involved.
So I think what was particularly interesting and grabbed our attention is the fact that it was all about identifying factors that could lead students, young people, to perhaps having either current or future mental health problems, and also about what factors could help them to be resilient towards that. And I think that was the really innovative side for me. It's not just, okay, here at a point in time we have X number of young people feeling either depressed or being bullied or having significant adverse life experiences. Okay, so it's not just about the measurement, it's also trying to understand what can help them succeed in future life and not to develop any sort of further or greater mental health or emotional well-being issues.
I think that's really nice, because I think sometimes there's a perception that research is just sort of this quite separate kind of intangible thing, but if you could immediately see these practical benefits, then
and absolutely, I mean, to be honest, the collaboration with the Reach team was just amazing. And in particular, what I found of great value, and I know the girls did as well, was the fact that some of them were able to volunteer for the in-depth interviews And I think they found that so beneficial. So for 3 years in a row, and some of them continued after that, they were able to have a one-to-one discussion with somebody about how they were. And I think that's not always possible at home. So it was just amazing for them, actually.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And did you meet any kind of concerns or resistance when you were kind of bringing the program in? I mean, either from the pupils themselves or from parents or other teachers who kind of thought, why would we spend our time doing this?
Well, there was a lot of work done in terms of letting people know what was going to happen, but also providing them feedback on a yearly basis, which is what Reach did for us. And they also came into school to explain those results to the rest of the teaching body. And I think everybody found that really interesting.
From what I've heard, it does take some kind of effort to get involved in research like this and to make sure, obviously, that everyone's getting the most out of it. So how do you think, for other schools who are maybe hearing this and thinking, oh, that actually sounds like something that we haven't considered, how can other teachers, other schools fit research into their strategy and get the most out of it without having to put in too much time and energy?
Well, obviously you need your senior leadership team to be buying into it. And I think, that goes without saying. But to be perfectly honest, I found that a lot of the organisation was done by Reach. So we had to send out, kind of information letters. Then there were consent or opt-out forms, rather. Every time we were doing the online questionnaires, they arrived with masses of iPads. And that will depend very much on how each school organises things. I mean, certain schools might have a period of academic tutoring for certain year groups, and that could be an ideal place to put it, or it could happen in a PSHE lesson, just, depending on how that is scheduled in their timetable.
Yeah, but it can be quite flexible to sort of suit the school's needs.
Completely, yeah.
As Caroline said, there isn't always that in-depth support in schools. Michael is a former social worker who is responsible for pastoral support at another Reach school, and he talks about taking part in Reach has strengthened and supported what he does.
If I'm honest, you hear research projects and you kind of think, oh, crikey. However, I try to go with an open mind. And when I seen kind of the simplicity of their work in terms of how they made it look simple and how they made the screening process looked simple, I was kind of taken in with that, and how child-centered it was as well. I thought that was great, because at times you see these research projects and they're not really kind of, they don't put children at like the forefront of how it's conducted, where Reach did.
Yeah, and I suppose with your your pastoral role and your kind of social work background, having that children or kind of student-centered focus is obviously key, and as it should be in in the research projects.
Yeah, massively. And also, I kind of when children are put at the forefront of it and their kind of needs are, then I think that you'll get better research from that.
Well, then I suppose it may not have impacted your role particularly, but has being part of the study and the results that have come out of the study, have they sort of shaped your role as this, kind of pastoral support at all?
Well, more so the school's direction. Previously, there was just me within the role in terms of pastoral support with my background as a social worker, and my role was to try and get interventions in. But thankfully, from the 3 reports that we've had from Reach, annual reports, we've kind of identified, actually, no, we need to do more. So our school, fortunately for us, they enrolled all the pastoral staff into a counselling programme. So we've got a level 2 counselling skills certificate now. And I think that was partly due to kind of Reach's work and kind of highlighting how much need there is out there. And also kind of, if that need isn't met, then what a negative impact that can have on the future generations.
Yeah, I was going to say it kind of becomes almost cyclical there. So it's, it's trickled through from the students, and now it's impacted, the pastoral staff, and now that kind of new skills and knowledge that you all have can be fed back into the students and the future generation. So just to round us off then, what would your advice be to schools or kind of similar support roles to yourself who are maybe thinking about getting involved in research or have decided they want to and want to really get the most out of programs like this?
I would say, please don't be dismissive, because we hear the word research and we hear, oh, that's going to be quite a lot of work, but actually the benefits far outweigh any effort that you have to put into it, and really run with it as well, because I think the information that you provided can kind of structure the support that you're going to put in place for years to come.
Well, Reach has clearly made a difference to the school staff, but what's it been like taking part in research for students? We asked a researcher on the Reach team to speak to a couple of the students who took part in the study and then went on to become members of the YPAG, the Young People's Advisory Group, which was recruited before the research staff to help guide the work. They also then went on to be young person community champions, who were former YPAG members who help engage current cohorts to carry on the research. Here is the researcher Alice with the first young person.
I don't think I really grasped what Reach was quite about in the beginning. I thought it was just people coming in and we did iPad stuff and then we answered questions. Honestly, they made us reflect on what we were doing and about our mental health and stuff. But I don't think that we really quite understood what it was about. But I got involved and interested because I think when I was doing the questions, I reflected on what it said, what it was asking of me, and I was like, wow, these things are really important to me, but I never asked myself these questions. And that just the fact that it was quite unique.
And next question I wanted to ask was, what longer term impacts do you see for students who've been involved in the Reach project?
The main thing, I think, is stigma, overcoming the stigma that surrounds mental health. I think when initially you guys started working with us in other schools around South London, we didn't know much about what mental health was. There was barely any awareness. No one really could say this is what mental health means, because we will grow into being the people that create like laws and policies. For us to get rid of the stigma that currently surrounds mental health means that they will no longer feel as though they're abnormal or wrong for feeling or for having a mental health disorder or anything along those lines. And I think that is a long-term impact that I've tried to see for the students that are involved in the program as of right now.
Now we'll hear from the second young person on how she got her role as a community champion and what it involves.
Well, I remember I attended a work experience and I really am interested in psychology. So like when I got the opportunity, I was already very happy. And then I remember on the work experience, they said how they had a YPAG role. I sent in that I was interested. I did the interview for that. And I remember Esther said that she liked me and that she thinks I should do the interview for the young person champion role. She was like, no pressure. And I was like, yeah, I would love to. And at that time, I was also looking for a job. So it was like perfect timing.
Oh my gosh, it's so good when those things work out, isn't it? And maybe you could tell a little bit now about kind of what your role at the moment with us. What does it involve? What do you do?
Well, I get to make so much content and like content on the research, what that we're doing, and spread like mental health issues and that. We also got to make a blog on misconceptions of anxiety, have a podcast coming up in the future. And I've also helped out with engagement, thinking of ideas to keep people engaged and to make them keep coming back to doing the questionnaires. So I've done quite a lot.
And I guess the other thing, just to jog your memory as well, is that you're involved in like helping facilitate some of the YPAG meetings. How did you find that?
It was really good, like to have like, you kind of felt like a little leader, like you're actually helping something and like just starting to stimulate conversation. And it's also like very interesting hearing about what people have to say that you never even thought about when you was planning. I absolutely love the role. If I'm being completely honest, it's been like one of the biggest things I've done in my life, to be honest. I love being a part of something and feeling like I have like a contribution. I've really enjoyed it.
So, Taishe, I'd be really interested to know how the students that we've just heard from, how their experience kind of compared to yours.
100% the same for me. I've got so much out of it, not just to take on to my future and like CVs and anything, but personally, like being able to even talk on podcasts, talk to people about my experiences, my actual thoughts, being someone that is just a normal 17-year-old, getting their thoughts across to millions of people, head teachers of that, like people that have so much power, be able to put my thoughts to them have been amazing. Like, yeah, the opportunities have been incredible and I can't thank Reach enough.
Well, with that in mind, what would be your advice to other young people who maybe haven't considered getting involved in research or don't think it will be that interesting for them? What would you say?
I will say you don't know it until you try. Like I went in not knowing anything about what I was doing. Like I started reaching. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going into, but I knew that I love psychology. I knew that I wanted to make a change in this world. I don't want to be a normal 70-year-old just sitting there, just listening to things I don't agree with and not making a change. So just go in with it. You're gonna love it. This legit. The things you get out of it from yourself, the things you get out of it from your CV, everything about it, you're absolutely love it. Just go for it. You're not gonna regret it.
So now we have some tips for people wanting to do research.
Tip 1. Go the extra mile with engagement is key and pays off in the long run. Researchers should make sure to highlight this in funding applications.
It also helps if both sides embrace the opportunity and find ways to make it work for you. So it can't be an extractive relationship, as Gemma said, but think about what you want to get out of it and how you can fit it into your schedule.
Tip 3. Researchers, give yourself enough time. 5 years is ideal. It may not always be possible, but it always allows you to be flexible to the school's needs.
Teachers, try and get your senior leadership on board from the start.
Last but not least, keep communication lines open on both sides. Researchers, let schools and young people know what to expect, and both sides should share results with the wider school staff to highlight why schools and researchers working together is important.
Thank you so much to everyone who's been involved in the podcast and in the Reach study. And thanks so much to Taisha. It's been great having you on the podcast with me.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. If you want to read the study's accompanying report or find out more about how to meaningfully involve schools in research, you can go to the McPin website, www.mcpin.org, or the Reach website, www.thereachstudy.com. You can also find us both on social media at McPin Foundation and at The Reach Study.